Velma is getting dust, and I am tired of this, Grandpa. Hi, hello everyone, my name is Jer, and I love a misleading edit. As the cast slims down, the storylines of this season are becoming more prevalent and more present. This week, we had a really heavy edit for Saltina, leading me to believe that either this was going to be a really impactful out week, or it was going to be her win week. The Drag Race editors have gotten a little formulaic over the years, and whenever a contestant gets a lot of confessional time, I feel like we're being primed for something big to happen that week for them. And with how much she was talking, I was sure that she was going home. I always enjoy when the Drag Race editors don't play all their cards at once, and I'm kind of glad that this season is not giving it all away. It's very much reminding me of season 3, where we did not see Giselle Lullaby emerge as the winner of the season until kind of late game. I think it was pretty unclear who was going to take it until well past the Snatch Game episode. So since we're theoretically at the midpoint of the season, I want to do a quick roundup of where I see everyone so far. Sammy is very clearly getting the underdog edit. They're this lovable weirdo who's made a direct mark on the competition, and I think is a solid front runner and is probably going to the end. They've sussed out the competition as of this week, are trying to figure out where alliances lie and where they don't lie, and I think the story that they're getting is very clearly painting them as being the underdog player this year. PM is making a lot of waves in confessions, but it is kind of hit and miss when it comes to challenges and runways. It seems like the general public is connecting with PM, but I'm not totally gravitating towards what they're presenting. They're almost giving me like Cynthia Kiss vibes, someone who's got a lot of potential to make really big splashes if something was just maybe a little more polished, and I can't help but feel like when PM gets an opportunity to come back for a Versus the World or an All-Stars, they are really going to make waves and a huge splash, because I think they'll have refined their aesthetic down and their brand down and be a little more refined. And since their story right now is not really trusting alliances, I wonder how that's going to manifest with the rest of the group as the season goes on. And since they've been painted now as the one who's probably gonna win all the lip syncs, I feel like that could be bad news next week. Velma to me is very clearly getting the player who is super strong and is very good at what they do that the editors seem to enjoy, but the panel is just not giving them their flowers, almost like a sugar cane in season 11. And I wonder if maybe by the end of the competition is when the judges will start seeing her as a power player and giving her some wins that she deserves. But by that point, it might be a little bit too late. And Ebony has massively shifted towards a front runner position, which has been great to see as someone who stanned her from the start and wanted her to be in top 4. She's great TV and has charisma in buckets and owns her space probably better than anybody else in this room. And Van Gogh is kind of getting an odd edit. I cannot tell if the editors like her or not. On one hand, they seem to enjoy what she brings to TV, and they feature her a lot in confessionals, but then when it comes to the challenges, she's getting almost edited out. And it's very much to me giving the I don't want to play with you anymore meme, and that worries me as someone who is rooting for Van. Maya is absolutely rising to the top as a top 4 contender for me. In the first couple weeks, I think she was totally in the background, but she's woken up, she is here, she is plugged in. I'm so excited to see more of what Maya brings, because this week was very good for her. Saltina is making some big breakthroughs personally, but what she's bringing to Drag Race proper seems to be running out of steam in my opinion. And I don't know, I think her time might be coming to a close. And the sun finally set on Dulce's storyline this week. Sorry, who said that? I honestly think her time ran out a couple of weeks ago, and I feel like this group, do I say this, has been giving her the Roxy treatment, kind of knowing that she was going to flop in challenges again and again, so they kind of kept her around so that they could get bigger players out. And on one hand, I think that's great strategy, but it's so shady. And I think maybe that resistance of putting her in the bottom gave her a little bit of a Delulu mindset, because I think this week she absolutely thought that she was turning it and burning it, and it was nothing of the sort. And lastly, Caramel, someone that I wanted to go very far and break top 4. I think maybe she's just a little too internal, and unless she can wake up, I think her time is coming. With Hazel gone this week, PM is feeling super devastated, which I was confused by. Last week they seemed over Hazel, and kind of seemed like if they could have tossed Hazel into a bucket of like sizzling fajitas, they would have done so and just gleefully stood there and cackled. So to see her so upset this week can abusified me. And Dulce was trying to wake it up in the cold open, but high-key, low-key, this girl was fast asleep. She's trying to say that she was out here performing better than Hazel in the previous weeks, which, like... Some people have eyes but don't know how to perceive things. And Miss Girl has been sipping way too much of her own sauce. And that Delulu vibe absolutely caught up with her this week. Who keeps saying that? PM wants to target Ebony for being the one who basically got Hazel out of the competition. And I don't know, I think any vengeance storyline sometimes leads to blindness on Drag Race, and you don't see when producers are trying to sideswipe you. Vocalizing wanting to eliminate someone who is making an upward trajectory is never a good idea on Drag Race. That usually prints out your ticket to get on the bus and go home. In the workroom conversation, Velma does bring up some of those jokes from last week, which I appreciated that she brought up, because I felt like I was on Crazy Town USA over here being offended by the alcoholism and the parent jokes. Like, everybody around you is just a drunk and hates you and wants you to die and trip on your shoelaces. And there were people in comments saying that they thought the jokes were hilarious, so I'm like, am I not funny or are these people not funny? And turns out I do have a sense of humor. So this was validating to hear, but Dulce makes a strange comment that bugged me. She said, oh, well, I have trauma too, but I wasn't complaining about you saying I was poor. Hold up. Trauma Olympics are so obnoxious to me, especially if you say, well, I'm not bothered by this, but I have trauma too. So mama, if you're not bothered, then why did you bring it up? It just wasn't a necessary comment, and I feel like this week, there were a lot of cards being played by Dulce that I was not liking. But let's not talk about her anymore because girl's gone. Tracy looked incredible this week in that pink look. That's mother for real. And she introduces the mini challenge, which is so silly. The queens have to participate in a karaoke style mini challenge where they sing multiple parts of famous lines from Canada's Drag Race. And this was a challenge that happened. Mama, this had to have been the longest production morning because I'm looking at all of this and I'm not very good at math, but there's 9 queens. Each one of them performed what seemed to be 3 songs, but knowing Drag Race, they probably had them do more than that. They have to get adequate B-roll footage, so get them to go up and do the karaoke. They probably had them do like 5 or 6 songs just to make sure that they had plenty to work with in post, just in case something didn't look right or something sounded bad. And each one of those queens had multiple songs. On top of the fact that PM broke a light, that seemed to be repaired pretty much immediately, so that had to have taken time to turn off the cameras, reset the scene, turn back on the cameras, and get back into the karaoke. And so you think about all of those numbers, that they were probably there for a couple of hours just listening to each other caterwaul, and that sounds miserable. And Xana gets yet another shout out this season. That is my production plant. I love her. That is icon shit for real. Dulce wins the mini challenge, which I wasn't in the room. I don't know how it actually sounded, but it did seem like they were trying to just give her a little consolation prize on her way out, because I'm sure that they knew it was her time. And she joins the pantheon of infamous queens across the franchises who win the mini and then go home the same day. And the maxi is extremely disconnected from the mini, which is to host a drag talk show, kind of in the similar vein of like a QNN or other talk shows that we've seen in some of the international seasons. This talk show is called The Shade. I always feel weird about these types of talk show / interview challenges because they're kind of thinly veiled as a personality-based challenge, when in fact, they want you to be funny. I talked about that in a video very recently about the tropes of what Drag Race is looking for and how they're not really interested in you being you. They want you to be a character. I went pretty in depth to the fact that things have changed on Drag Race, because back in the day, they wanted you to show vulnerability, and now they don't want that. What's different about this challenge from others that are sort of in its lane is that it's pairs of 3. Normally we see these either solo or in duos. So this particular challenge sort of more put it in line with Pink Table Talk of All Star 6, which I like the idea of that until we actually get into the mechanics of it. I found it interesting that only one group out of the 3 had an actual interviewee, which to me sort of imbalances the challenge. And one group is set up as the very clear, stronger point of view. And while an interview can get messy very quickly, especially with multiple folks, and we have seen that in many seasons of the past, after you have them sit around for 2 hours listening to each other wail, I can only imagine that it would be such a welcome opportunity. I would be chomping at the bit to talk to somebody that was not any of the fellow queens. What I also found interesting is that they self-assigned their teams rather than allow Dulce to pick her group and then maybe assign the others. We see advantages usually given to someone who wins the mini, but like I hinted at earlier, it felt like they knew Dulce was about to go and just didn't want to give her any opportunity to stay. I'm not terribly mad at that, but it is odd. Maybe they were worried that if they allowed her to choose her group, she would pick some strong contestants and then might slide through the challenge and go to the next week while a stronger player ends up going home. And so the groups are as such. We have Saltina, Dulce, and Caramilk as the first group covering the realness. This is a segment that is meant to discuss all things drag related. Sounds like an interesting concept on paper, if this was indeed a personality-based challenge. But they really want you to be humorous. Maybe for a DragCon panel this could be interesting, but they didn't tackle it like a DragCon panel. And it didn't help that the three of them visually had zero cohesion. Saltina was going to the ballet, Dulce was going to an awards show where the lights were probably out, and Caramilk was dressed like she was a backup dancer at a Carly concert. Dulce was the quasi-moderator of this group, but like if having a personality was optional as the moderator. Honestly, I felt like Caramilk was oddly the most personable and interesting of the group. I kept sensing her wanting to break out, but then she'd pull back and resist. I didn't even notice Saltina at all. She just kind of disappeared to me. But overall, I was bored to death, and those lingering shots of the queens along the sides, like practically yawning, counting the dots on the ceiling or the lights in the rafters, was embarrassing to watch. And it sort of hammered that this was the group that was going to be low. Overall, I felt like this group came off like a skit for YouTube Kids. That's not good. And I've also got to bring up, as a viewer, Dulce was really getting on my nerves. When she was making that decision process all about her, like, oh, you guys just didn't want to work with me and it's very clear. That's an awful thing to bring up and drag down the energy into the depths of the bog before the challenge even starts. And then playing these cards saying that Saltina was trying to silence her, which was very clearly not what was happening, I got secondhand embarrassment from. Ebony, Van, and Maya are covering a segment called Tea Time. This group was initially framed as the one to beat since they're all winners here. And so I was kind of worried about them in general. They have a lot of expectations to meet. And Maya in particular was feeling the pressure of being with two people who made their marks and kind of seem like they're endgame players. Maya, to me, is coming across like an endgame player, so I don't think she has anything to worry about. Skipping just a bit ahead towards the judgment, I found it odd that Ebony was the only one singled out of her group to be there. Like, yes, she was really good, and I think she absolutely deserved to be high, but I think that Velma was fantastic in her group, and I think she stood out against two players who she didn't seem like she was going to stand out against. So yes, Ebony was amazing, but was Velma not also amazing? I don't know. Going back again, this group had the gargantuan task of resetting the energy after the miserable flop that was the last group. They were meant to spill some tea on celebrities, throw some shade, which I think if Drag Race was filmed closer towards where we are in the now, I think this could have been wildly topical and actually interesting. It's kind of the same problem that I have with the RDR skits where they want them to do a news segment, or even back in QNN days. It's hard when you are meant to do something that's sort of topical and poking at celebrities, but everything's not current. This was filmed 8-9 months ago. I do feel like they chose some interesting topics, so I appreciated the subject matter. I just wish that these challenges could be more topical. I want to say visually, I think that Van in this green tweed moment was everything. I loved Ebony looking like she was going to a Michelle Visage meet and greet, and Maya was serving in this fun red print with those structural shoulders. I would wear any one of those outfits at any given time. And Ebony had so much personality that she really just bulldozed her way through this challenge. Her charisma stats are progressively getting buffed every single episode, and I love to see it as a stan. And I could not tell how much all of this was edited or if it was one shot, but Van practically disappeared from the edit. They were a side character, essentially, to how well Maya and Ebony were doing. Anytime they would say something, Van would react very shortly, and then it would immediately scoot back over to Ebony. That could be an editor tool just to continue to reinforce that Ebony was top 3 this week. I get the distinct impression that Van is not on the radar right now, and they put her on the back burner while they focus on other stories. That's different for Canada's Drag Race. We normally see kind of a clunky edit of whoever makes their mark early on. They usually stay in the top and continuing to dominate each challenge and each edit. So again, I'm kind of glad that cards are not being played all the way and I don't know what's going to happen at the end. It makes guessing and interpreting what the edit is telling me that much more fun, which is an excitement that I needed for Drag Race for so long. And my thought is either they're done with Van and they're not going to use her anymore, or they're just tabling her while they focus on some other talents and foster them to make them look like more viable potential winners. And this is not meant to be shady, but as of right now, most of the cast doesn't come across like they've got the sauce to win, and I think that is a lot what season 3 felt like to me. I think the only true contender by about the midpoint was Giselle. Maybe Fierce, maybe, but even then that seemed like a stretch. And Jada Shada was fantastic, and I loved her spooky supernatural tea about getting her booty done in the middle of the night by a ghost. But she didn't come across like a viable winner against Giselle. And so I'm guessing that's probably why they put Ebony high this week. They need to solidify their other players and not just make it seem like only 1 or 2 have the chance to win. And then Sammy, PM, and Velma finish off the challenge with Couchside Kiki. The goal is to interview Kaisa and not step on each other along the way, which is very difficult when you have this many contestants all trying to conduct an interview. And this is kind of what the problem was back in QNN days of Drag Race. The news segment was a bit of a snooze, the weather girl was hit and miss, hail no storm, sorry. But having a new energy in the room, someone untainted by the shenanigans of the competition, could be super refreshing and offer something less stagnant than having to talk to your fellow competitors. This segment seems so out of place with the other 2. It's the only one that includes a third party. And while I like that, it very clearly came off to me like this is the #1 group. They finish off the night, so they're gonna be the most memorable. But I was most nervous about this group. It's a lot of really big personalities, and I wasn't sure how they were all going to temper themselves to play well together. Visually, Sammy and Velma were kind of in the same shades of 80s realness, where PM looked so massively out of place in this sort of 60s mod hair, but then in modern knitwear. What was the look? I didn't like this group aesthetically nearly as much as I liked them as a energy package. They worked well, they had good synergy, they balanced each other perfectly, I feel. And I feel like their questions were interesting. Never was there a moment that reached the edit where things seemed awkward or clunky. Kaisa just seemed to be connecting with them kind of in the same way that we saw Chaz and Georgia connect with someone like a Courtney in season 6 during that interview challenge. I love this group a lot. They impressed me significantly, and they restrained themselves well in a challenge that required them to show a lot of personality without stepping on each other. The workroom conversation was an emotional one for sure when we get there. Van opens up coming out as HIV positive, which I can't imagine is an easy conversation to have around cameras, knowing that millions of people around the world are going to perceive it, have their thoughts about you, and then make their interpretations of you as a person. Because the reality is that HIV is still very stigmatized, and strangers talking about you is not the vibe. But what I think is interesting with this story is normally the contestants we see come on Drag Race, think like a Norma Jean in Italia or Trinity K. Bonet, these players that are talking about their status, they've already kind of gone through the journey of self-exploration, they've already done a lot of unlearning of maybe toxic mentality about what that entails, and they've already sort of processed that journey, where we're seeing Van in kind of the start of this journey, opening up the conversation to learn more. And I think that is going to be really helpful and healing to people who are also at the beginning of that journey and not really sure where to go. Moving to the runway, Brooke looked stunning in black and white. I love those little pops of red. She is serving it every single week and showing us how it is done to be a host on Drag Race. Take notes, RuPaul. You don't see Brooke looking busted out here on this runway. Sorry. This is the realness. And the runway category is so weird. It's a perp walk to remember. What a weird freaking category. It's a big swing, and I do appreciate that Canada's Drag Race is not just giving us the same stale red carpet or reveal yourself that all the other seasons usually do about this time in the competition. Sultina is out first doing an Iron Maiden look. I think it's tough because at the beginning of the year, we saw Susie Toot do an immaculate Iron Maiden look, and this sadly was the Temu version of that, I think. I like that it opened up and had all the punctures on the nude illusion. I do wish the hair was a bit more period accurate, and Brooke brought that up later in critiques, so I was like, oh, thank God I wasn't the only one who thought that. And then I thought the accessories were maybe a little too 2006 Hot Topic couture. Still a slay. Dulce is a girl who stole a bunch of shit that nobody wanted to buy. That's the story I have because I don't know why she was wearing any of this stuff. Thieves do not have to have good taste, I suppose. And it had the blue pack in it, so it was exploded. I like the scale of the items because they looked oversized, kind of lending to this story that she's a younger character who stole all this stuff. But the hair could have maybe been more upwards like an Ariana pony because it was so flat. Overall, the look was a chop. Caramilk is someone who stole from the bank. Not the hoochie dress and the cuck mask for the robbing of the bank. We need to go out in a full one piece. The police are gonna be able to identify your body with all the video footage. This also had a blue pack in it, but the color wasn't vibrant enough to stand out, so it was a little muted on the runway among all the lights and everything. And it was very, very simple. I love her, but it was a chop. Ebony is doing a Marsha P. Johnson tribute, which I clocked right away. Walk in the room brick first. This color looks great on her. Also, Derek's influence with the judges. Nobody died at Stonewall. I do wish it had a little bit of a train at the bottom, but I'm not gonna nitpick. It was still cute. Slay. Van Gogh came out next in a white feather look with this red chain link hanging off of her. It's meant to be a tribute to how the justice system treats folks with HIV, which I appreciate the commentary of. I think the fit looks nice, the blood on the hair and the eyes was very ooky spooky, and I really have been enjoying the versatility of Van's looks this season. We haven't gotten the same silhouette every single week, and for that, I'm happy. Slay. Maya Fox is next and is the village trollop. She showed her ankles and got arrested. This was so cute and so stupid. The performance made me gutturally laugh. I love seeing more personality from her. I feel like she really woke up at Snatch Game and has been on an upward trajectory, which I love to see. I'm enjoying her more and more as the season goes on, and I need her to get to the end. Max slay. PM was inspired by the bathhouse raids in Toronto. I've read a lot about the bathhouse raids of the 80s that happened in San Francisco, so I can only imagine it was kind of similar to what happened there. This is an important conversation to have politically and for this challenge, that our queer safe spaces have been spaces that we flock and gravitate towards, but there's always the possibility to be discriminated against. That's important for us to remember. PM was trying to bring a little more masculinity and filth, heavy on the filth. And the kink was gross, gross. Very Dragula tea. I will say, this look made me wonder if I am actually kinky and if I like armpits and jock straps, or if maybe PM is just a little freakier than me. And by a little, I mean a lot. And I've come to the conclusion after some prayer, PM is a little freak. Like a lot of a freak. That said, I didn't like the look at all. I think it was more about being gross than being a political statement. I didn't like all the textures that were on this costume. I think the tea jar of this jockstrap and sock water was just there to be gross. And there is a place for filth and drag to intersect to talk about something political, but I don't think that's what this did. Just me. I didn't live. Chop. Velma was also doing something crazy. She's a girl who wanted all the maple syrup in the world, so she went to go steal it, but was being chased by the police, so she jumped into a vat of maple syrup. It was funny as f. It was super couture. What is this? This is insanity. This is the inner workings of a mad woman, and I'm so here for it. And this sort of melted wax looking material to translate as the syrup I thought was brilliant. I loved it all over this mini dress and then the big fur coat on top of it. This was my favorite look of the night, and I think it sold the story maybe best out of anybody else. I very much was getting a sitcom interpretation of a perp walk to remember. The one where they jumped in the vat of maple syrup. Super slay. And then Sami is doing a conversation about overfilling of the gaze. So she had all of her syringes and was giving herself a little pump. I don't think this is a perp walk. Maybe it's that the gays are guilty of being too sickening. I don't know. I don't know about all this. She put on that yassified filter one time on TikTok and said, that is a look for Drag Race. The construction was messy. It was a little over exaggerated. I didn't live for the Jimbo boob butt situation. I live for this crazy girl, but I was not living for this look. It was a chop to me. So then we get to deliberation where Van, Maya, and Velma are called as the safe queens, which, let's wake it up here. Velma should have been top 3. I don't like that the groups got broken up. Ebony should have been safe with her group. I think it does speak volumes to how much they love what Ebony does that they broke her away from her group. But Velma was the strongest of her group, in my opinion, and had the best look on the runway of her trio. Probably this should have been her win week, since last week wasn't, and she was very close last week too. And Saltina, Dulce, and Caramilk are the ones that are called as the bottom group. Sami is called as the winner of the challenge this week, which I get, but I do think this should have been Velma's win week. And I get the sense that she is being set up as an endgame player, and they want to know how she's going to navigate the social elements of this game. She's forming an alliance with the other weirdos of the room, which is an interesting perspective that we haven't seen so far on Canada's Drag Race. So she's got a good story to tell from an editing perspective. And in Untucked, she wants to know what the girls are going to improve on. I don't know if this is a great parameter on who to save, because it makes everything slightly unclear in my opinion. The girls can say whatever they think will be the most beneficial to stay. And ultimately Sami decides to save Saltina, which I think was the correct choice. But it also seemed like an incredibly safe option since this is Saltina's first bottom placement and first opportunity to get a beaver. And so it's sort of unshakable logic here. The lip sync song is called Dancing and Crying. Me too, girl. Caramilk is a fierce lip syncer in my opinion, but I think she needs to amp up the volume just a little bit more to make it Drag Race ready. I think she's a sickening performer, and if I saw her in the clubs, I'd probably tip her. But sometimes her movements and stunts, I think, become a little familiar after a while. It's an arm flourish here, it's an arm flourish there, it's an arm flourish down here, and I've seen it already. And Dulce goes for it, and she tries to do everything, but it's both messy and muted at the same time. I also don't think this was the best song to lip sync to, but Canada's Drag Race loves a mid-tempo lip sync song. Caramilk ultimately is in and moves on to the next week, even though I think there was adequate reason why Dulce should have won that lip sync. But what is she bringing to TV? What is she bringing to the competition? I don't think she's been that interesting, and she's Delulu. They don't need a Delulu girl this season. I feel like you can only play the Delulu character if you are also bringing something to the competition, like really excellent confessionals, really excellent runways. You cannot be the Delulu girl, the one who's not very good on the runway and has lousy aesthetics, and also is trying to be the villain but isn't the villain. Like, Van and Ebony have the villain role on lock. They know what they're doing. So attempting to be the villain, I think she thought that might get her some points with the production team and the editors, but it just didn't because she's not that girl. She's just Delulu. And if you're gonna be Delulu, you gotta bring something more than that. I don't know. Bye, girl. The editors not blurring her wig line as she was doing her mirror message was a hate crime. It was giving tortilla. Next week, 2 queens are going home. That is a gag. And it's the lip sync slay-offs, which I have been waiting for, and considering that there are only 8 queens, I'm guessing they're gonna go to the style of season 4 rather than the style of season 5, which I'm also very here for. I do think that the bell is ringing for Caramilk. I think the way that she lip syncs, it might get repetitive in a SmackDown. And I also worry that Maya might be out, which I don't want to put that energy out into the world, but I feel like everybody else that is here right now, they're kind of locked in on, and PM has been placed as the one who they all need to find a way to beat so that they don't have to lip sync against PM, but we'll see. What'd y'all think about this episode? Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see y'all on the flip.